You can sit next to a complete stranger on a flight and tell them things you've never told your mother. You can open up to a friend you met 2 years ago in a way you never could with someone you've known your entire life. You can walk into a room full of people who don't know your name and feel weirdly, inexplicably free. But the moment you walk into your family home, something tightens, something in your chest recalibrates, and suddenly the most you version of you goes quiet. That's not ingratitude. That's not dysfunction. That is a specific, documented psychological response, and it has everything to do with where you learned who you were allowed to be. Stay with me. Let's get specific, because this deserves specificity. You're at a family gathering. You're surrounded by people who've known you since before you had opinions. And somehow, you feel more alone in that room than you do walking through a city of 8 million strangers. You're performing a version of yourself that stopped being accurate years ago. You're answering questions with the short version. You're dodging the real conversations. You're counting down until you can leave without it being rude. And then 2 days later, you're at dinner with people you met in college or at work or online. And you're laughing. You're saying the actual thing. You feel light. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, "What is wrong with me?" Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Here's where it gets interesting. What you're experiencing is the psychological consequence of something called role-locked identity. Here's how it works. Every family system, no matter how loving, no matter how functional, assigns roles. The responsible one, the funny one, the difficult one, the peacekeeper, the golden child, the one who needs to be managed. These roles get assigned early, often before you're old enough to have a say, and they calcify over time through repetition. The problem isn't that your family is bad. The problem is that once a role is assigned in a system, the system resists updates. You can grow, evolve, heal, completely transform your inner world, and walk back into that family dinner, and within 20 minutes, someone is treating you exactly like you were at 15. And your nervous system knows this, which is why it braces on entry, because that room is not responding to who you are. It's responding to who you are. Now here's what people assume when they hear this. They assume the person who feels safer around strangers must have had a terrible childhood, abuse, neglect, something obviously dramatic and painful that explains the distance. And sometimes that's true. But here's the twist that almost nobody talks about. This pattern shows up just as often in people from loving families. Families that tried. Families that cared. Families where nothing was technically wrong and yet something essential was never quite seen, because the damage doesn't only come from cruelty, it also comes from misattunement, from being loved in a language that didn't match how you received it, from being good-intentioned but not quite understood for so long that you stopped trying to be understood there at all. That's not a dramatic trauma narrative, but it leaves a very real mark. But this is the part nobody talks about. Strangers are safe for a reason that is deeply psychological, and it comes down to what therapists call freedom from anticipated judgment. With strangers, you get to be the narrator of your own story. They have no prior data on you, no version of you filed away from 2009, no memory of the thing you said at Christmas that one year, no comparison to your sibling, no investment in you being a certain way because it makes their world more comfortable. You are, to a stranger, a blank slate. And that blank slate? It is intoxicating to someone who has spent their whole life being read through the lens of everyone else's history with them. Psychologists call this decontextualized self-presentation, the ability to present yourself outside of your established social context. And research consistently shows that people report feeling more authentic, more open, and more emotionally honest in decontextualized social settings than in environments where their identity has been predefined by others. In other words, you're not running from your family. You're running toward a version of yourself that your family's context doesn't have room for. And this changes everything. Let me say something directly to you, because I think you need to hear it without a caveat attached. The fact that you feel more yourself around strangers does not make you a bad son, daughter, sibling, or child. It does not mean you don't love your family. It does not mean you're cold or detached or running from intimacy. It means you are someone who has a self that is larger than the container your family built for it. And that is not a character flaw. That is actually evidence of growth. Evidence that you have developed beyond the narrative that was written for you before you were old enough to write your own. The people who feel this most acutely are often the most self-aware, most emotionally developed people in their family system. The ones who did the work, who asked the questions, who refused to keep being 15 just because it was convenient for everyone else. You didn't outgrow your family because you're ungrateful. You outgrew a role that was too small. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to understand. Here's where the neuroscience enters and makes this impossible to dismiss. Research on social identity threat, pioneered by Henri Tarschfeld and later expanded by Claude Steele, shows that environments where our identity feels scrutinized or constrained trigger measurable physiological stress responses, elevated cortisol, increased amygdala activation, reduced prefrontal cortex function, which is the part of your brain responsible for emotional regulation, authentic self-expression, and complex thinking. Translation: when you walk into a room where your identity feels threatened or boxed in, your brain literally operates at reduced capacity. You become less articulate, less emotionally available, less you, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is in a mild but real fret state. Here's where it gets interesting. The same research found that in psychologically safe environments, places with no prior judgment, no role assignment, no identity threat, those same cognitive and emotional capacities came fully online. People were funnier, more honest, more creative, more connected. So the reason you feel more alive around strangers isn't in your head, it's in your brain chemistry. The environment is literally unlocking you. Let's go somewhere more tender for a second. Because underneath the neuroscience and the role theory, there's usually something simpler and sadder. Something most people in this situation have never let themselves fully name. You wanted to be known by your family. Really known. Not managed, not handled, not loved in the shape they needed you to take, but seen. Fully. As you actually were. And at some point, and you probably don't even remember exactly when, you stopped expecting that. Not with bitterness necessarily, just quietly. The way you stop checking the mail for something you've stopped believing is coming, and you found it elsewhere. In friends who chose you without history. In strangers who heard you without agenda. In spaces where no one had a stake in you being anything other than what you were in that moment. That's not failure. That's adaptation. That's a human being finding the nourishment they needed, do whatever doors were actually open. Here's where it gets interesting again, though. Here's the story most people in this situation tell themselves. I must be broken if I can't connect with the people who are supposed to know me best. Let's replace that story with something more accurate. Connection is not guaranteed by proximity or shared history. It is not automatic between people who share blood. It is not a function of how long someone has known you. Connection requires something much more specific. It requires that the other person is willing and able to see you as you currently are, not as who they need you to be. Not as the role you filled in their narrative, but as the living, changing, evolving person standing in front of them right now. Some families can do that. Many genuinely cannot, not because they don't love you, but because seeing you change requires them to update their own story. And that's a kind of emotional work not everyone is equipped for. The fact that strangers can meet you where you are isn't evidence that you're broken. It's evidence that you're available for real connection, that when the conditions are right, you show up fully. The conditions just haven't always been right at home. That is not your fault, and it is not permanent. So here's what we know. You feel safer around strangers because strangers respond to who you are now, not who you were then. Because decontextualized spaces allow your nervous system to come offline. Because role-locked environments, no matter how loving, can shrink you in ways that familiar and chosen relationships simply don't. And you are not alone in this. You are not strange for this. You are not broken or ungrateful or emotionally unavailable. You are someone who knows the difference between being in the room and being received. Between being known chronologically and being known actually. And that distinction, that ability to feel the difference, is a form of emotional literacy that most people never develop. Use it. Not to write off the people who love you imperfectly, but to stop punishing yourself for needing more than imperfect love can sometimes offer. And to keep building, deliberately, intentionally, the circle of people who see you as you are right now. Not who you were, not who they need, you, now. As is, that person is worth knowing. Now, if this landed somewhere real, there's one more piece to this puzzle you need to see. Because people who feel safer around strangers than family almost always carry one more pattern, they are exceptional at reading the emotional temperature of a room. They can sense tension before it's spoken, feel shifts in energy before anyone names them, and absorb other people's emotional states almost without trying. That's not a coincidence. It developed for a very specific reason, in a very specific kind of environment, and it has a name, a psychological explanation, and, importantly, a cost that most people in this situation are paying without realizing it. That's the next video. And I think you already know you need to watch it. It's right there. Let yourself be seen a little longer. If this video made you think differently about yourself, press like, so more people who need this message can find it. And subscribe, because the next one will probably explain something about you that you didn't even know how to name.